All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So, today we're going to be talking about VORUNA. VORUNA received one particular change in Abyss of Dagath that is changing her rather significantly and allowing her to have a build that I would say is pretty good um, without just slapping a heavy attack melee weapon on her and calling it a day. That being that her 4, this mode for her, this is now considered a melee attack for exactly the purposes of proccing her 3, which means that she can now use this ability to, with her 3, generate health orbs. This ability is the lunge and hit. That is very clearly like a melee attack that made sense to be considered a melee attack. But it is worth noting that it is not considered a melee attack for the purposes of everything. It's not affected by Steel Charge or Arcane Fury or a bunch of stuff that would affect melee just in general. And that is a bit unfortunate as it appears that her damage has lowered. It feels lower. It feels like considerably lower than it was before. Pablo did look into that and said that everything was normal, so I've got to evaluate it as is, I suppose. But it feels like the damage has gotten worse on her from what it was before the changes and this update came out, because I did do some testing prior to kind of see where she was. With that, though, she does now have a build that I feel is at least good without needing to just use a heavy attack weapon and have that be that. And this is what it looks like right now. So, of note, this is what I am using. This is a Catalyzing Shields build with Brief Respite. Anytime I cast my 2, or really pretty much anything except for Shroud of Dinar, I am going to get the full second of Invulnerability. That is important because of the way that your 1 and your 4 work, because you're not invisible all the time and safe all the time. So, having the refresh for your shields is very, very helpful and kind of needed, honestly, especially in Steel Path levels. Other than that, we have a ton of strength. We are on Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify, bringing us up to 243. We do not have any strength shards on because those actually need to be used in other places, but we do have Molt Augmented, so once this is stacked up, we are at 300% strength. For duration, we do want at least a little bit more because the duration on Shroud of Dinar is generally a bit low, so we are on just Prime Continuity to bump that up a bit. We are also on Stretch because the spread range of Fangs of Raksh is pretty bad by base. It's 7 meters at base. 10 meters is doable with another thing that we're adding to this build. And then we are also adding Prime Flow and also 2 Energy Max shards because her Energy Max is pretty rough whenever we're kind of needing to use Blind Rage in order to make her do enough damage in content. And then Ulfrin's Endurance. Ulfrin's Endurance is the thing that you have to equip in order for her 4 to be worthwhile. Which is during Ulfrin's attack, enemies that die from bleed within 20 meters restore Varuna's charges. So this allows you to spend on your 4 one time, and then as long as enemies are dying to slash, which is what this ability does, you are going to be getting more damage, and then also refreshing your charges as the enemies die, spreading like all the statuses with your 2, having them still be dying with slash on them, increasing that, having them with a lot of the procs increases the duration of like a ton, so you don't have to recast this. So theoretically, you're only ever recasting your 1 and your 2, which together are about 100 energy, but also you're probably going to be casting Fangs of Raksh multiple times, so it's not exactly the cheapest running build in the world. So we are also on Arcane Energize, which is part of the reason we need Prime Flow, is because we need to be able to fill up that energy and keep it topped off so that we don't run into any situations where we can't cast, because if you can't cast, you can't refresh your shield gate, and then you just die. Worth noting, after testing this build a bunch, it is really notable that this is not really going to work in any situation where you can get nullified. If you get nullified or can't use your powers or need to deal with nullifiers, it's pretty tough. Like using your 1 and staying in your 4 doesn't do anything to nullifiers. There's no way around it. You can't like cast another ability or do something else. You'll have to have a teammate deal with them or exit your 4, losing all your bonuses. And then you can't exactly dive them with Dinar, and you're going to have to shoot them, which will break Dinar, so you're going to be vulnerable the entire time you're dealing with a nullifier, no matter what you do. So if there are nullifiers, I really can't suggest VORUNA in general on a build like this, which is another tough point for VORUNA right now. If you want a more general kind of not caring, you just want to play as VORUNA type build, Probably something like this is going to be more your speed. This uses all the Umbral mods and adaptation. It's the exact same amount of Forma, and it's a setup here that is, a very high amount of strength. But honestly, what you're doing with this build is going back to not using Ulfrin's Descent, and just simply grabbing a good heavy attack weapon for the vast majority of the time. Obviously, you won't have Empower on here. This is just a thing I was testing at one point. You'll have her base ability, her 3 for energy generation on this, although you would want to swap to Equilibrium if you were going to be doing that. But yeah, Shroud of Dinar to stay safe a little bit and like have some invisibility, spread statuses, and just kind of like do stuff if you just want to be VORUNA for whatever reason. And then you can just kind of exist with this build. It's not something I would suggest. There's a lot of better frames for something like that. If you want to actually use VORUNA's kit, you're going to be over here. But her kit is just not that versatile, and she doesn't have great ways to stay safe that are not catalyzing shields if you're going to actually use her abilities, because her abilities require a ton of different stats. There's not really anything you can drop. Like, theoretically, you could drop just Prime Continuity, but with only one slot, you're not really going to get all the way to like a defensive build if you're going to be like, slotting in on instead of Prime Continuity, say it was like Vitality, and then instead of catalyzing shields, you're using Fiber, but you'd probably rather use Adaptation at that point. Like, you're not going to get all the bonuses on Intensify to bring your strength up, so that maybe you could drop Blind Rage. There's just a lot of things that kind of go wrong with it, and you can't drop Stretch because otherwise your 2 just does not have enough range, and so on and so forth. In addition to that, her range is even still pretty bad, so we are running Nautilus. Nautilus, this is the build for Nautilus for anyone who's unaware. We use Cordon with Manifold Bond. Manifold Bond is companion precept mods, apply status effects from companion weapons, killing enemies with 3 or more unique status effects, a thing VORUNA is very good at, reduces companion cooldowns by 3 seconds. This is a 15-second cooldown, so every time you kill 5 enemies, you will always have Cordon refreshed. This is a 30-meter pull. It pulls enemies into a pretty tight area. Being able to have Nautilus spam this really fixes a lot of the problems with VORUNA because she doesn't have range, and Nautilus can help her out by putting the enemies right in front of you so that you can do your stuff and have it work quite a bit better. And by work quite a bit better, I mean that if you are using Nautilus on VORUNA, it pretty much doubles her KPM. And that is not a joke. Like, we're going from killing, like, 600 or 700 enemies, and that's kind of, generous in, like, a 10-minute Kuva Steel Path, and that is going up to, like, the 1,000 range that you would want to see, but again, she has a bunch of downsides that kind of prevent her from fighting the other factions in effective ways that a frame like, say, Hydrate's new kit would not have any trouble with and would kind of not care, no matter what faction you're fighting. In fact, Hydra actually cares very little about nullifiers because his 1 kills them. But yeah, that's like what's up with VORUNA. I will note you usually are using the status effect resistance, so you don't have to run Prime Sure-Footed, and just in general, status effects would be the thing that would be most dangerous to you, that would normally kill you, so you're usually going to want to keep her 2 on. That, if you decide to go with Prime Sure-Footed, you could theoretically do the extra life, but you probably don't want to have to count on that whenever you could just set it and forget it with the status effect resistance. I will note, I've had some weird stuff with that, where using her 2 a bunch, every once in a while it will just kind of like turn off, because you are able to turn that off. So like spamming it will sometimes kind of weirdly trigger that it should turn off, so you might have to turn it back on every once in a while. Anyway, so the 20x heavy gunners, worth noting the startup on this is going to be pretty bad. That's because these are almost level 200 steel path heavy units. Usually there are smaller units for you to, of course, build up on by the time you get to this level, so take that into account, that you're usually you are going to be built up. And you can see that you flash there and are like vulnerable for a moment. You can see Nautilus doing his absolute mostest for us. Oh, we used all of our charges actually there. There you go. The enemies are all dead though. But yeah, whenever you're doing this test, like usually you can run out of charges and have any number of different things go wrong with that. But she can definitely kill the enemies and is not in much danger as long as she's not being nullified and has enemies that she can use her melee on in order to kill them, which is a lot of enemies. Works on acolytes, works on the vast majority of things, I would say. But yeah, that is pretty much how VORUNA is working. You're just trying to stay in her 4, utilize her 2 a bunch in order to have Cordon come back up as fast as possible, and of course extend the duration of your 3. The enemies dropping health orbs whenever you kill them with your 4 is going to give you the energy back, and generally your energy economy is going to be pretty good. especially whenever you are grouping enemies up and killing them with many fewer slashes than you normally would need to, because they are all sitting together. Yeah, with that, let's jump into the steel path for a bit. It's pretty good. Of note for the shards that I have, I will say I have 2 casting speed shards in here, and those are not necessary for her to, like, do stuff, but they make her kit feel immensely better to have a little bit of casting speed on there. At the absolute least, I would go with 1 Tau casting shard, but probably 2 Tau versions of this feels even better. But of course, the regulars are more than fine. I've had a very good time with the 50% casting speed on here. And the energy max, while not technically needed if you're going to be using primed flow, if you're not going to be using primed flow, you probably want both of these for 100% for sure. And then kind of the only thing you put in like the last slot here is probably going to be duration just to make things a bit more comfortable. But you could, of course, go with more strength if you really wanted to. Or if you want even more casting speed or even more energy max, which I could see, maybe you put 3 Tau energy maxes in. And then you can drop prime flow, I guess. Seems like an awful lot of investment to me for the kind of content that VORUNA is really suitable for. But, you know. Anyway, moving on to the steel path. All right. Let's jump into ye old Cougar Fortress. But yeah, having just recorded the other part of this video that you just saw, with a brief intermission between, the first part of the video probably seems a little negative. And that's because it is. That's because it is. Like, coming off of using new Hydroid, and also Degath, actually, too. Like, using VORUNA made me think more highly of the way I feel about Degath than her current state. Which, that's not good, probably. That's probably a negative thing for that to be the case. I need some energy here before I can really actually start. Thank you so much, Nautilus. You are truly a treasure and a dream. Come on, please, just enough. I tell you what, I'll use my my immense powers of having a glaive with me. That's definitely... It's not cheating. It's just using the other things I have in my inventory. Yeah, her energy economy, you know... Using her, like, her 2 into her 4 also feels... Like, it's not bad feeling to, like, do it. It does feel really inconsistent for it to, like, do what you would think it would do. Like, you would... Like, her 2 is supposed to, like, spread statuses, right? And, like, sometimes it does what it did there, where I hit 2 and then I hit 1, or, well, I left click, rather, in order to attack. And it spreads... And, like, it kills like them with all, like, the slash damage. But sometimes it just feels like it doesn't do... Like, it doesn't spread, like, the statuses and, like, keep the damage of them. Which, when it doesn't do that, then you get into this weird place where it just feels like it doesn't kill anything. Which is truly mysterious. And you can see how much Nautilus is helping with her range issues. Because her range issues are, like, horribly bad, even with Stretch installed. But Nautilus does... just such heavy lifting. I'm going to keep it absolutely $150,000 with you guys also. Bringing Nautilus with a frame that is capable of, like, just being a weapons platform, as long as those weapons proc some status, which, you know, is going to be most of the really good weapons in the game, you can do a way better version of this, like, with just some guns, than what VORUNA can output. And also, you'll be, like, insulated against nullifiers and the like. So it's, yeah. I tested this on stream, and I felt, like, quite a bit more positively about it. But then, like, I started comparing it to, like, a lot of other things. And also, I tried it against, like, Corpus, and it was horrible. Because she just does not have tools to deal with nullifiers, because her one's not, like, a true invisibility, like you get with, like, Ivara and such. Because Ivara don't give a shit about nullifiers. And they don't give a shit about her until they're dead. Yeah, it's kind of a weird one. I like VORUNA, and I want her to be good, but it feels like her numbers aren't in the right place for that to be the case. Like, it feels like you could probably double the spread range on her too, so that you would at least not feel like you absolutely have to run something for a range increase, and probably Stretch. Because, like, what she really wants for a range increase is overextended. But whenever you do overextended, since this update, her 4 just doesn't feel like it does enough damage to, like, really get you anywhere. And if that's the case, then what are you doing? Like, we're back to square one with, like, you might as well just use a good heavy attack weapon, which, also to be clear, is still the case. Like, just a regular good heavy attack weapon will vastly outperform this. You'll have to recast your 1 more, but that'll hardly matter because enemies will be dying so much faster. But at least this functions. Like, her at a base level, like, this works. And before, she had the problem of it not working. It's kind of similar to Ureli, where, like, Ureli's, like, base kit, like, she didn't really have a lot to be doing, and then they gave her 3 augment, so now she can technically do her 3 augment. Is it as good as a bunch of other stuff? Absolutely not. But at least it's a way for her to, like, play the game without, like, you know, just kind of relying on a gun. And it's not bad for, like, Warframes to rely on a gun, unless they have abilities that should ostensibly be doing something without a gun, you know, like a DPS ability of some sort. And that's the thing we see with, like, the Hydroid rework, is Hydroid is very capable of killing many, many enemies with no assistance at all from his guns. Like, he can be built around his DPS abilities and do an absolutely stellar job, even though he has, like, a 3 that is, like, just absolutely incredible for doing weapons platform stuff, and it's great in the situations where he needs to use it, but he does not really need to use it all the time or super often, and that's, you know, that's kind of great, which is so odd to be, you know, waxing poetic about how good Hydroid is. Like, that feels still very strange, because not enough time has passed where that has been accurate for certain. You can see this kills the Acolytes quite well. They don't like it. But yeah, it's very, you know, she's very okay. Like, this certainly is not, like, unplayably bad or some nonsense like that. Like, I would never say that she is, like, you know, useless or something silly to that degree. But she definitely feels like she could use some number tweaks. Like, I wouldn't actually change anything mechanically about her at all, I feel. Or, like, you know, at the very least, like, she would need nothing major. Maybe build in her 4 augments so her 4 is useful without an augment. That would probably be, like, the one thing. But other than that, like, I feel like she's mechanically sound and her numbers just simply aren't high enough. Which, in the grand scheme of, like, problems for a Warframe to have, is quite minor. Right? Like, we're talking, like, that's, like, you know, first world problems compared to Warframes like, let's say, Limbo, for example. But, it is a thing that whenever you compare her to a Warframe whose numbers feel like they are kind of exactly right, like Hydroid, it is a bit odd. It is a bit of an odd feel. And it could just be, like, you know, enhanced by me going from, like, one directly to the other. With, like, very little in between. Like, the only thing I did between doing, like, oh yeah, let's get Hydroid on the level and do all this stuff, which was after Dagath, was, like, do some companion testing with Mesa for the most part, which is, like, you know, if there's a Warframe whose numbers are very adequate, it's going to be Mesa as well. So it could just be some of that. But it is interesting how it makes me look at Dagath more favorably. And I still think that Dagath needs some, you know, proper tweaks here and there to feel more full, as it were, if I guess that's the right wording. You can see this, like, this is definitely not bad. And we look at our KPM, we're like 800 in like 7.5 minutes, which is super solid. Thanks once again, in no small part, to Nautilus. Nautilus is probably the #1 huge surprise, I think, for most people going into this update. Like, I don't think anyone really expected Nautilus to be incredible, but wow, he is. He is extremely good, and he's, like, generically good, as well as has particular synergies, which, you know, turns out, hey, Larva on a Sentinel, essentially, is really, really solid. Who knew? But the real thing is like that cooldown makes it so much better. But honestly, I'd probably take it even if it did not have like the cooldown mod. Like some people are speculating that that will get nerfed, and even if it does, like Gordon every 15 seconds or so would still be quite a boon to a lot of things. Or even if like you needed more kills to get the cooldown, like if the cooldown amount got reduced, would still be quite solid. You can see this really doesn't have any problems with Xmas. Takes like a couple more hits, I suppose. Oh, I actually used too many charges. Unfortunate. I have to like reset where her 4's at. Is going okay so far. As you can see, survivability wise with like the catalyzing shields, like we're restoring our shields very actively, and it is not being a problem for us to do some surviving. Yeah, coming out of your 4 in order to need to, like, you know, take down nullifiers and stuff though is a huge problem, and there's no real way to supplement that. You kind of just have to get out of your 4 and do it. That second acolyte at? Be here any minute now, right? We're at about that 10-minute mark, so just to show off the kills. We're at 1100, which is super good, actually. But, like, again, extremely worth noting how much of that is Nautilus's consideration. It is about, like, a kind of 700-ish range. Like, it is improved by a lot by Nautilus. Nautilus being able to bring the enemies to VORUNA because she has no capability to do so really is super excellent for her. Just, you know, run the acolyte down real quick and easy. Then we can peace out. Switching to her hold 1 for her extra movement just to get to the end of missions and go fast, which is quite nice. The main thing you miss out on most of the time from, like, you know, sticking to her 2 in order to be status immune. And huge long mission. But yeah, she is improved in that she can use just her abilities to, like, actual real effect now. But I would say overall she still has a ways to go in terms of what you could get out of her, or in terms of, like, where she probably should be at, honestly. Yeah, overall she's fun. She's a good time, but just pretty narrow in what she can accomplish, and she needs quite a bit of support to get there too. Not to mention, you know, augmenting and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's VORUNA with the changes and such. Hopefully we'll see more, ideally. I kind of expected the change to her 4 to get her there, but I'm sad to report that that's kind of not been the case. All right, welcome to October, everyone. We have some big updates coming, so expect me to be going over them. But before we get to that, thank you very much to all of these super patrons: Alex Barnum, Arbiter Daydream, Nuven, Latomatic, Brandon Coggin, Brutus Salazar, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, Fawn, IQ is Thick, James Harsthorn, JC4 Science, John Lobdill, Joshua Adams, Luzanth, Mikakel, Minty Ginja, Mitchta, Nerve, Remoxidate, Tamarilla Wastelander, The Coupon of Death, Tomeworm, Waifu War, Zack Zaner, and Zeraphir. And of course, thank you to all of the $5 patrons as well. It is extremely appreciated for the support. But yeah, we have huge reworks coming this month. I'm definitely going to be making a bunch of content around those, and expect the next free-to-play through to be starting relatively soon. We are going to be starting that before the end of this year for sure. Should be a really exciting time, and thanks for the patience while I've been sick. I appreciate it, everybody.